Hey there. Get ready for a deep dive into the world of Christianity.
A religion that's impacted, well, everything really, from art and music to philosophy and politics even.
You got it. And you want to really understand its journey,
From its very beginnings, you said.
all the way to its global influence today. You've provided some excerpts from the Wikipedia article on Christianity, which is a great place to start for a topic this big.
It's amazing, isn't it, to consider just how deeply Christianity is intertwined with human history, I mean.
Definitely. And speaking of history, one detail that often gets lost is just how unexpected Christianity's rise to prominence actually was. It started as a tiny little sect within Judaism.
You're talking a handful of believers trying to get their message out there in the middle of the Roman Empire.
Talk about humble beginnings.
It's almost impossible to imagine, right? This faith that went on to shape empires, inspire countless works of art, all starting with just a few people.
What was life really like for them back then? Those early Christians navigating a world that wasn't exactly, shall we say, primed for their message.
Imagine, okay, you're trying to preach about love and peace in a society obsessed with gladiatorial combat and worshiping a whole bunch of different gods,
It seems like persecution was a constant threat for those early Christians.
challenging the status quo, right? Especially in a powerful empire like Rome. That was a risky move, let me tell you.
And on top of all of that, early Christians were also dealing with internal debates. Debates that would end up shaping the future of the entire religion.
Well, yeah, like the conversion of Gentiles.
Non-Jew.
Right, non-Jews, which led to, disagreements about whether these new converts had to follow Jewish law.
So they're dealing with persecution from outside and arguing about their own identity at the same time.
Yeah.
What a pressure cooker. What caused Christianity to eventually become its own distinct religion, would you say?
It happened gradually, but those Gentile converts were a major factor. I mean, as more and more people from different backgrounds started to embrace Christianity.
It had to forge its own path,
Yeah.
separate from Judaism.
Exactly.
And then, of course, there's the turning point when Emperor Constantine shows up.
Constantine, the emperor who basically gave Christianity the stamp of approval.
Right. In 313 AD, he issues the Edict of Milan, which basically decriminalizes Christianity.
And with that, Christianity goes from a persecuted faith to one that's embraced by the Roman Empire and eventually becoming the official religion.
Quite a turnaround. But as Christianity spread throughout the Roman Empire, it must have become more diverse. The Wikipedia article actually mentions 6 major branches.
6, which I have to say feels a little overwhelming, even for someone who knows a bit about Christianity.
Could you break down some of those branches for us?
Okay, so the 6 major branches are Roman Catholicism, Protestantism, Eastern Orthodoxy, Oriental Orthodoxy, Restorationism, and the Church of the East.
And they all share that fundamental Christian foundation, but
They've developed their own distinct beliefs and practices over the centuries. It's like, a family tree with 6 main branches, and each one has branched out even further as time has gone on.
not exactly one big happy family then.
Well, 2,000 years of history, cultural differences, and different
It
interpretations,
was bound to lead to some disagreements.
divisions. But probably the most significant split, what's called the Great Schism,
Of 1054 AD.
1054 AD, resulted in the big old division between Eastern and Western Christianity.
A schism.
Mhm.
It sounds intense. What were the main issues that led to such a huge split?
It really came down to authority. The Eastern Church, which was centered in Constantinople, rejected the Pope.
The head of the Roman Catholic Church.
Exactly. They wanted a more decentralized structure with different patriarchs leading various regions. And here's the interesting thing, despite this major schism,
Both the Roman Catholic and Eastern Orthodox churches still share a lot of the same core beliefs.
like the divinity of Jesus and the importance of the sacraments.
Even within divisions, there's often common ground.
It's like any family, really. Disagreements are bound to happen. But those underlying family ties, they're still there.
So those family ties can be pretty strong. But we've still got a few more branches of Christianity to unpack here. What about Oriental Orthodoxy? That name is definitely intriguing.
It's a branch that people don't talk about as much as the others, but it actually predates the Great Schism.
The one we just talked about.
Yeah. Oriental Orthodoxy actually split from the church way back in the 5th century.
Wow, even earlier. What caused that?
Big theological differences, mostly concerning the nature of Jesus.
It seems like those early church debates were really something else. They were wrestling with some seriously complex stuff.
It really shows how devoted they were to understanding their faith.
So we've got Roman Catholicism, Eastern Orthodoxy, Oriental Orthodoxy.
Yeah.
What about Protestantism? That's a pretty significant branch of Christianity.
Huge. And to understand its origins, you really have to go back to the 16th century. A German monk named Martin Luther was not happy with what he saw as corruption in the Catholic Church.
I've heard of him. Wasn't he the one who nailed something to a church door?
Yes. In 1517, he nailed his 95 Theses to the door of a church in Wittenberg, Germany.
95 Theses. What were those exactly?
They were basically a list of grievances, like a giant "we need to talk" note to the Catholic Church.
What kinds of things did he disagree with?
A lot of things, but the sale of indulgences was a big one.
Indulgences.
Basically, people could pay money to the church to reduce their time in purgatory.
Ah, I see.
Luther thought that was super corrupt. He also emphasized that salvation comes through faith alone, not good works or rituals.
Luther's actions really did shake things up. That was the start of the Protestant Reformation, right?
Exactly. And the aftershocks are still felt today, with tons of Protestant denominations around the world.
Okay, so that covers Catholicism, Eastern Orthodoxy, Oriental Orthodoxy, and Protestantism. We've still got two more branches, right?
Right. We've got Restorationism, which, as the name kind of implies,
They want to restore Christianity to its original form.
exactly. They believe that over the centuries, all the traditions and dogma, well, it kind of obscured the true essence of Jesus' teachings.
So they're hitting the reset button, basically. And it's really interesting to see how throughout history, different groups have tried to rediscover the core of their faith. Restorationism actually includes a really diverse range of groups, but some of the most famous are probably the Latter-day Saints, or Mormons as they're more commonly called, and the Jehovah's Witnesses.
Wow. So even within one branch, there's a ton of variety. But with all this diversity, what beliefs do Christians share? What's at the very core of this whole faith?
That's the big question, right? Despite all their differences, Christians all share a belief in Jesus of Nazareth.
And they believe he wasn't just a prophet, but the Son of God.
Exactly, the long-awaited Messiah.
That's a concept that carries a lot of weight. How does the Christian understanding of the Messiah differ from the Jewish understanding? I mean, Christianity did come from Judaism after all.
Yep.
That's a really important distinction to make. In Judaism, the Messiah is traditionally seen as this future leader descended from King David who will, usher in an era of peace and prosperity for the Jewish people.
So what you're saying is that Christians believe Jesus was that Messiah.
Right. They believe he fulfilled those prophecies, but not in the way that a lot of Jewish people expected.
So less of a conquering hero and more of a spiritual savior.
Exactly. For Christians, Jesus' life, death, and resurrection, they represent the ultimate act of redemption. They believe that he offered humanity a path to salvation, to reconcile with God.
Salvation, reconciliation with God. These are pretty big, loaded concepts. What do they really mean?
Well, to understand them, you have to understand the Christian understanding of sin. Basically, sin is seen as this separation from God. It's caused by human disobedience, human imperfection.
It all goes back to Adam and Eve, then.
Right. That original sin in the Garden of Eden. Christians see that act of disobedience as that original sin. It introduced this brokenness into the world, and it separated humanity from God.
So we're all carrying the weight of that original sin, that separation from God.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
And that's where Jesus comes in. Christians believe that his death on the cross was an act of sacrifice. It was an atonement for the sins of all humanity.
Okay, so by believing in Jesus and accepting his sacrifice,
Humans can bridge that gap, that sin that separates us from God.
it's a powerful concept. But you mentioned Jesus as the Son of God. Where does that fit in with everything else?
Ah, yes. That brings us to the Trinity.
One of the most confusing concepts in Christianity, or so I've heard.
It definitely can be hard to wrap your head around, but it's the belief that there's one God. But this God exists as three distinct but eternally connected persons: the Father, the Son, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit.
3 persons in one God. That's a lot to take in.
I know. It's a mystery that theologians and philosophers have been trying to figure out for centuries. Think of it this way. Imagine a single ray of light. Now, you can refract that light through a prism, and what happens? You get a whole spectrum of colors.
Each color is different, but
But they all come from the same source, the same light. The Trinity, while definitely difficult to understand, shows that God has many different sides. He's the creator, but he's also the redeemer. He's transcendent, but he's also intimately involved in our lives.
it's a really beautiful image.
Yeah.
But moving on from the abstract to the, well, less abstract. The Wikipedia article talks about Christianity's massive cultural influence. Can you give us some examples of that?
Oh, absolutely. It's impossible to ignore the impact that Christianity has had on pretty much every part of human culture.
Yeah.
Art, music, literature, architecture, philosophy, you name it.
It's everywhere.
Think of Gothic cathedrals, the beauty of Renaissance paintings, Gregorian chants. Even our calendar is based on the birth of Jesus.
Sounds pretty amazing.
It really shows how Christianity is woven into the very fabric of our world. And I'm not just talking about the specifically religious stuff either. It's the values,
Yeah.
the ideas, the stories. They've all become part of our collective consciousness.
It's really incredible when you think about it, how these expressions of faith, these incredible works of art, have gone beyond their religious roots to become something we all share. But beyond those physical expressions, what about Christianity's influence on, ideas, how we understand ourselves, the world?
Now that's where things get really interesting. Christianity introduced these radical new concepts, the inherent dignity of every human being, the importance of compassion and forgiveness, the idea that love can actually be this transformative force in the world.
Powerful stuff.
Yeah. And those ideas, whether people realize it or not, have totally shaped Western thought. They still inspire debate today, even social movements.
It really shows you how these big religious ideas, well, they're not just a private thing. They have a way of, rippling outward, impacting laws, art, even just our understanding what it means to be human.
It's true.
And speaking of ripples, there's this little detail in the Wikipedia article I found super interesting. Did you know that the New Testament is the biggest collection of scriptures of any world religion?
Wow, I didn't know that. That's really saying something.
What do you think it reveals about Christianity, if anything?
Well, I think it shows you something about Christianity right from the very beginning. Remember how those early Christians, they were facing persecution, uncertainty, all of that, but they were so focused on writing everything down. The stories about Jesus, everything that formed the foundation of their faith, it was important to them.
They really wanted to get that message out there.
Absolutely. They knew how powerful those stories were, how they could inspire people, offer comfort, offer guidance. They really wanted to share those stories, and all that careful writing, that determination, it's a big reason why Christianity became so influential.
It's a testament to the power of, well, the written word, right?
Yeah.
These texts, they're ancient, but billions of people still find meaning in them today. It's incredible.
It really is. And it makes you wonder, doesn't it? Christianity has come so far. From this small sect to a global faith.
And it's still shaping our world today.
What do you think the future holds? What will Christianity look like in another, say, 200 years?
It's impossible to say for sure, but if history has taught us anything, it's that Christianity, it adapts, it changes with the times, and it will find new ways to, share its core teachings. It's always been this incredibly diverse, dynamic faith, and it's always searching for meaning.
That's a great way to put it. It's been fascinating exploring the world of Christianity with you today.
You too. And to all our listeners, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We encourage you to continue exploring this amazing, complex faith. There are so many stories to uncover, connections to make, and insights to discover. Thanks for listening.